New York City, the place where dreams are made, where every street is woven with history and fueled by ambition. But beneath this towering skyline, another story is unfolding. One of rising waters and shrinking space. One of increasingly frequent flooding and a housing market that's gone through the roof. That's what the city of New York is facing. But what if there was a single solution to both problems? A solution as audacious as it is necessary. Hey, I'm your host Regis, and today we're gonna look at this insane plan to expand New York into the sea. An idea that would take decades to construct and cost over $30 billion. So what's the plan? And could this ever be built? Let's find out. To understand how this plan came about in the first place, we have to take a look at Manhattan itself. If you've never been there, here's what it looks like. Bang at the center of New York City, a 60 square kilometer island surrounded by rivers on all sides. You've got the Hudson to the west, the Harlem to the north, and the East River, you guessed it, to the east. In terms of population density, Manhattan is one of the most crowded islands on the entire planet. As of 2024, there are 1.6 million people living there. That's 30,000 per square kilometer. Jeez. Things get even worse during work hours. Manhattan is the heart of the New York economy, with the stock exchange on Wall Street plus hundreds of other financial institutions. Every Monday to Friday, commuters press in from the rest of the city, and the island's population almost doubles to 3.9 million. To fit everyone in, Manhattan is extremely vertical. The island's skyline is dominated by skyscrapers, including the Empire State Building, the Central Park Tower, and the One World Trade Center, the 7th tallest building in the world. Expanding upwards like this is a great solution on an island with limited floor space. But Manhattan hasn't just expanded upwards, it's also expanded outwards. Let's jump back for a minute to the 16th century, when Europeans first arrived in North America. Back then, Manhattan was a very different place. Obviously, there weren't any skyscrapers on it, but as well as that, the island was 25% smaller. It first started to grow thanks to this guy, Thomas Dongan. He traveled to America in 1682 and became the governor of a small English settlement at the southern end of Manhattan. When Dongan became governor, one of the first things he did was dump some dirt into the Hudson River. Why? He wanted to expand the coast and set up a battery on the newly constructed land. No, not a battery like a source of power or something like that. That word also has another meaning, a fortified spot for heavy defensive guns. So if you've ever visited modern Manhattan, you might have been to Battery Park. That's right on the spot where Thomas Dongan dumped that dirt into the river. As expansions go, it was pretty minor, just a few square meters of land. But it set the scene for the next 3 centuries. As time went on, the island of Manhattan got bigger and bigger and bigger. The East River waterfront was gradually expanded outwards. The west side of the island was expanded too. Here's what the island looked like in 1865, 2 centuries after Dongan arrived there. The green parts are the original natural island, and the red parts are man-made land. These expansions had a range of purposes. In some cases, people were just smoothing out the coastline, making it easier to build ports and docks. But the main reason for expansion was making more space. In the days of Thomas Dongan, Manhattan had been home to less than 10,000 people. But by this point, towards the end of the 19th century, the island was already home to around 1.4 million people. The city of New York had also spread beyond the island of Manhattan, with people now living on pieces of land like the area now known as Brooklyn. But the majority of the people who lived in New York were still living on Manhattan. Throughout the 20th century, the population kept growing, and so did the edges of the island. During World War II, piles of rubble from bombed-out buildings in Britain were shipped to New York and used to expand Manhattan into what would later become East River Drive. Then in the 1960s, rubble pulled up building the World Trade Center was used to build Battery Park City. As we said before, modern Manhattan is 25% bigger than the original island. If Thomas Dongan was alive today, he'd struggle to even recognize it. But maybe this is just the beginning. It's time to talk about New Mannahatta. That incredible plan for Manhattan Island's biggest expansion yet. It's the brainchild of this guy, Jason Barr, a professor of economics in Newark. In 2022, he wrote an opinion piece for the New York Times which laid out his idea in full. 7 square kilometers of extra land. That's what Barr proposed. It's a 10% extension to the existing island, stretching south into the waters of New York Harbor, incorporating the landmass of Governor's Island on the way. This new land would be covered by, and we're quoting Barr here, housing in all shapes and sizes, from traditional brownstones to 5-story apartment buildings to high-rise towers. As you can probably guess, Barr wanted all of this to ease the pressure on New York's growing population. Remember, at the start of the 20th century, there were 3 million people in the city. Now, just over a century later, that number has passed 8 million. New York has more people than any other city in the United States, with more than twice as many as Los Angeles, which is the second biggest city on that list. And the city's current housing projects are really struggling to keep up with the demand. Now, thankfully, since the COVID-19 pandemic, this problem has eased a little bit. There's been a slight decline in the city's population as more and more people start to work remotely and move away from urban areas, but as of 2024, this trend appears to be turning around again, at least in some parts of the city. Manhattan's population is on the up again, and experts seem to be expecting that growth to continue. As things stand, there's so much demand for limited apartments that the average New Yorker will find themselves spending almost $4,000 on their monthly rent. Good lord. To put that into perspective, it's more than double the national average for the already expensive United States. But New Mannahatta would provide new homes for 250,000 people. Assuming those homes are priced affordably, and of course Barr said they would be, they could ease the pressure off of the rental market and give New Yorkers some much-needed breathing space. These new homes would be perfectly located too, right at the heart of the city. But New Mannahatta isn't just a solution to overpopulation. It's also meant to solve another problem, and this one's pretty important. We mentioned this earlier, but New Mannahatta is also meant to protect New York from climate change. Now, it's easy to forget sometimes, but when it comes to climate change, New York is right in the firing line. It's a low-lying city at the edge of the Atlantic, which makes it extremely vulnerable to rising sea levels, coastal flooding, and storm surges. See Hurricane Sandy, for an example. And new research has even revealed that Atlantic Ocean currents might drastically change in the next few decades. A collapse of these currents would alter global weather, and who knows how this would affect New York. This overview from today's sponsor, Ground News, is based on 45 articles covering this topic. Now, Ground News gathers related articles from around the world into one place and gives you context about the sources, including political leanings, factuality, and who owns them. Here, for example, you can see that 72% of the articles are coming from highly factual sources. You can even sort by factuality to find reliable information more quickly. This lets you compare coverage from more factual outlets against less. On top of that, Ground News is really great for uncovering political leanings. They even have a blind spot page where you can find news stories that have little to no coverage from one side of the political spectrum or the other. This level of insight is why we've partnered with Ground News for the long term. We love it as a tool to stay up to date and form our own independent opinions. Subscribers fund Ground News, and they intentionally don't rely on ads to remain as objective and reliable as possible. By going to ground.news/megabuilds or clicking our link below, you can get a massive 40% off their Vantage subscription, the same plan that we use. Or you can try it for less than $1 this month. Give it a try, and many thanks to Ground News for sponsoring this video. These issues are already here. In 2012, Hurricane Sandy kicked up record-breaking waves, which washed over parts of the city. 2 million people lost power, all the subways to Manhattan were flooded, and 6 hospitals were forced to shut down. It was a dark moment for the city, but how much worse might it be a few decades from now when the sea level is higher and another storm like Sandy arrives? The southern end of Manhattan Island, including the Wall Street Stock Exchange, will be especially vulnerable to surges from New York Harbor. According to one study, almost half the buildings in Lower Manhattan will be at risk of storm surge by 2100, and 20% of the area's streets could face daily flooding as a result of rising sea levels. Funny enough, Lower Manhattan is in the exact same spot where the first Europeans established New York back in the days of Thomas Dongan. Wall Street is actually named after, you guessed it, a wall that used to run across the top of the settlement. Now, if this part of the city was taken out of action by future flooding, it would have a devastating effect not just on New York, but potentially the entire world economy. Wall Street is the home of the largest and most prolific stock exchange on the planet. Major flooding there could lead to short-term chaos. Of course, they could relocate, but they'd have to be prepared as well. So where does New Mannahatta fit into all of this? According to Barr, that expanded land to the south of Manhattan would act kind of like a buffer and push currently vulnerable places further inland. Wall Street wouldn't be on the front line anymore. Instead, it would be tucked away. Of course, New Mannahatta would find itself sitting on the front line of climate change instead. But unlike the rest of Manhattan Island, this new piece of land could be specifically designed to cope with the problem at hand. For example, it would be built at a higher elevation than the rest of Lower Manhattan. Barr didn't say how high exactly, but the number we've seen from some other sources is 4 meters, just about enough space to comfortably handle any rising sea levels. New Mannahatta would also be built with other protections against rising sea levels, like some wetland economies along the newly constructed coastline. These would help to absorb any storm surges. Research has shown that even a simple salt marsh can make a massive difference by dampening the power of waves. Most of Lower Manhattan is directly exposed to the open water, without so much as a tree to protect it. But New Mannahatta would have a much more robust defense against the elements. In other words, this extension would kind of function like a giant storm wall. A giant storm wall with homes on top for 250,000 people. When you put it like that, this project actually does sound like a pretty great idea, right? But actually, not everyone agrees with that. When Barr shared all of this in the New York Times, it didn't take long for people to point out the problems with New Mannahatta. A lot of commentators thought that the project was too big, too vague, too strange, and too extreme. One article called it galaxy-brained, another called it crazy and wild. And they pointed out that Barr had only described the idea of New Mannahatta. At no point had he explained how this project would be built, or how long it would take to build, or how much it would cost to build. You get the picture. According to these critics, this isn't an actual plan. It's a pie-in-the-sky idea. All style, no substance. All sizzle, no steak. But is this criticism valid? Well, Barr doesn't think so, and it didn't take long for him to respond to these people in a lengthy post on his blog. In the post, he explained that the how of this project wasn't as hard as everyone was making it out to be. Extensions like this one had been happening for centuries in countries all around the world. The official name for it is land reclamation, and the Netherlands in particular are experts at this. During the 20th century, they added almost 2,000 square kilometers to the country. When you compare that to the 7 square kilometers of New Mannahatta, the project suddenly sounds a lot more feasible. And the Netherlands aren't the only ones doing this either. In 1998, Hong Kong built a 9 square kilometer island where they set up a brand new airport. The Palm Jumeirah in Dubai is 5.7 square kilometers. And then, of course, there's all the work at Manhattan itself. Over the last few centuries, it's been extended by 15 square kilometers. If all of that could be done, then why not New Mannahatta? All it would take, said Barr at least, was 130 million cubic meters of landfill. That sounds like a lot, but every single year, he went on to explain, America pulls up more than double that amount from dredging projects all around the country. If some of that fill was just sent to New York, dumped in the water, and held in place by some solid sheet piling, then New Mannahatta could be put together in no time. Okay, well, not quite no time. It would take 15 years, according to Barr. And that's just the land itself, by the way, not the buildings on top of it. So if we're being realistic, this is a plan that probably wouldn't be done in the next 30 years or so. In terms of cost, the land, and again, we're not talking about any buildings here, would come in at a predicted $34 billion. That's also a lot, but Barr insisted that the project would pay for itself. So here's a quick calculation. If the land of New Mannahatta costs around $34 billion to construct, and the area of that land is 7 square kilometers, then the cost of that land is just under $5,000 per square meter. If we then add the cost of buildings to that number, and Barr reckons that those will cost $5,000 per square meter as well, we're getting to a construction cost of $10,000 per square meter of new Mannahatta real estate. And how much does real estate usually sell for on Manhattan? Again, Barr provides some numbers here, about $15,000 per square meter. Essentially, that means that whoever constructed new Mannahatta, whether that's the local government or a private company, could sell off the work for more than 30% more than it originally cost to build. To quote Barr again, new Mannahatta makes sense because Manhattan sale prices are so much higher than the construction costs. When you put it like that, the project is sounding a little bit more convincing, right? But there's something important that we do need to point out here. As we said at the start, Jason Barr is a professor of economics. He's not an expert in construction, he's not an engineer, and he's never worked on a project like new Mannahatta. In other words, we have to treat all of the claims that he's making, all these facts and figures and costs and numbers, with a little bit of caution. Take what he's saying with a grain of salt. His blog post does link to a lot of different sources, which is good. He's trying to back up his claims with factual evidence, but some of these are dead links or go straight to Wikipedia. This isn't exactly an academic peer-reviewed paper. Which doesn't mean that Barr is wrong about all of this, but it definitely feels as though this whole idea needs like a serious feasibility study. We don't know for sure how difficult it would be to new Mannahatta or how much the project would cost. We don't even know if the project would provide all the houses it's meant to, or prove to be a practical defense against climate change. And there are other issues to think about too. Last year, NASA performed a study on New York and found that parts of the city were slowly sinking under the weight of all those buildings. Which parts of the city specifically? Well, mainly the areas on artificial land, where the ground is looser and more compressible. Midtown Manhattan, for example, is doing relatively fine because its buildings are all sitting on bedrock. That means that newer constructions like Hudson Yards shouldn't be badly affected. But lower Manhattan on that artificial land is now sinking at a rate of 4 millimeters per year. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot, but it all adds up. One researcher said that the ground is going down and the water's coming up. At some point, those two levels will meet. Studies like these make new Mannahatta feel suddenly a lot less attractive. And so far, we haven't even talked about the environmental impacts of the project. In that blog post we've mentioned a few times, Barr admitted that such a project will have environmental concerns. Scientific studies would need to take place in order to determine how new Mannahatta would impact currents and natural habitats in New York Harbor and beyond. One thing is for certain. In the coming years, New York needs a way to deal with rising sea levels and to find a solution for its bloated population. But whether or not new Mannahatta is the answer, right now it's honestly just too difficult to say. Other solutions have been thrown around, like the BigU Project, a 10-mile ribbon of parkland, walls, and movable floodgates at the southern end of Manhattan. The BigU is actually under construction, with funding directly from New York City. Then there's the Climate Resilience Master Plan, which is a plan to elevate Manhattan coastlines and install some powerful anti-flooding drainage systems. Projects like these are expected to cost less than $8 billion combined. They're certainly cheaper than new Mannahatta at the very least. But are they better than new Mannahatta? Again, we can't really answer that question right now, not unless those feasibility studies we mentioned earlier are actually performed. So a better question to ask might be this one. Is new Mannahatta a good enough idea to justify those further studies? We want to know your answer, so let us know what you think in the comments down below. Thanks as always for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, feel free to subscribe, and as always, we'll see you in the next video.